All right, that's a go. Welcome to Professor CardWorthy, the money explainer, where we talk about all things financial. When we look at the financial market as a money explainer, we're looking at it from two angles, the consumer and the business. Now, I've been a student of the payments business primarily for over 30 years, and we have helped millions of consumers understand about how their credit cards work and how to get the most out of them, and so forth and so on, at the same time educating them as to why certain things are done on credit cards, why certain fees are charged, certain interest rates. We can explain that because at the same time of serving consumers, we also have helped the banks become more competitive and profitable and understanding exactly what's going on in the marketplace so that it ends up bringing better practices to the business. And Professor CardWorthy covers all financial areas. We're going to go way beyond credit cards into investing and saving and borrowing, all those types of areas. But today, our lesson is simply meet Professor CardWorthy. And this is our first video. This is unedited. We're just starting. We did a series a few years ago, and I'll explain about that a little bit later. But the important thing is we're trying to get you to understand a little more about us and what we're going to be doing, and then you'll be able to enjoy it because this is all available not just on the YouTube as you're watching right now, but also on the podcast. All the podcasts are carrying it now, and then of course we have the blog called Professor CardWorthy's Corner, and that particular blog is where you find a lot more information. I mean, what we talk about here today, it goes into a lot more detail when you get into the podcast and if you go online and read the blog. And you can read a lot more about me. But like I say, we're going to talk about Professor CardWorthy. Of course, that's me. And I have an outline over here. Let me slide this little whiteboard in here. And it's just a guide to kind of give you an overview, a little bit of our history and where we've come from and what we're doing. We actually started in 1986, and it's kind of a fluke thing. The personal computers came out in 1985. That's the first time you really had a computer that you could use as a tool rather than just a toy. And it gave birth to what we call the desktop publishing age, where you could take a database, a word processing program, and other applications. There were only not that many of them available, but you could bring that all together where you could write something and then dispense it through desktop publishing. And so it really was able to bring publishing down to a level. It leveled the playing field, let's put it that way. But we started out looking at mutual funds in 1986. I thought that would be a great area to build a database. There was about 400 of them at the time. Okay, let's track them, track their volatility, because people were just beginning to get into the retirement savings, the 401ks, and we thought that could be very, very helpful to them. So that's why we started out in mutual funds. But one day I got a solicitation from a credit card in Arkansas that charged 8% interest. Well, at that time, in the mid-'80s, all the credit cards charged, for the most part, 19.8% interest with a fee, $15, $20 fee. But it really piqued my attention. What is going on here? I mean, 19.8%, 8%. And so I began to do the research, and I found out that there was a huge gap all across the country. And at the same time, banks were really not competing with one another. They were just kind of like issuing cards to their own customers. And they didn't really go outside of their footprints. In fact, in 1986, when we were following it, they were just beginning to introduce what's called the gold card. And then they were able to upgrade existing card holders to a $5,000 minimum credit line called a gold card. So that's how simple the market was. It was very plain vanilla and not anything, of course, like what we have today. But that's what got me interested. So I thought this is a great thing, but nobody knows about it. So we put together a $1 list that we compiled, which just simply showed all the rates, the best rates in the country and so forth and so on, to allow people to see. And it kind of opened your eyes. And at that time, there was a lot of misconceptions too. I mean, I had people would say, well, I didn't know you could apply for a credit card out of state, or I didn't know that you could have more than one Visa or one MasterCard. But anyway, this list helped to clear the air, and when it got into the news media, we were able to dispense a lot of that. At the same time, like I say, banks were not competing. Well, then they were beginning to look to markets. They wanted to expand nationally. There was a lot of barriers, legal barriers, because they had to comply with different state laws. Well, it ends up that we ended up producing a bank card directory. We published 7 of them to cover all the regions of the country, and it was very extensive. It went through, for the most part, just about any issuers of significance in those 7 regions. And we published that, and that was also, of course, promoted in the news media, but it was intended to give the banks a good feel for the market, as well as, of course, informing consumers about it. And of course, again, the news media was beginning to pick up on this. Well, this is great. I mean, people didn't know this information. So, when you look at it, it was, for consumers, it really gave you that comparative information that you needed to be able to decide, should I get a credit card for 8%? It might have a lower credit limit, but would it work for me? And so forth and so on. At the same time, businesses, like I said, the banks didn't know what each other was doing, but at the same time, they didn't even understand the profitability, or what they call the metrics of the business, from one another. I mean, they stayed pretty much in their area. So that was another opportunity, was to be able to start understanding, well, if this bank is issuing credit cards over here, what are they making? And as far as profit, what's the delinquency rates, the charge-off rates, how many customers they sign up, how many are they losing as they sign up? So all of that was part of what that developed into the business side. So at the same time all this is going on, there were some issues that emerged that we played a major role in and started advocating. I mean, we advocated for consumers, and we at the same time did some advocating for banks. I mean, that's a real tightrope to walk, and believe me, I have yet to find anybody else that can do that. But we went to bat for consumers over the over-limit fees, and then eventually the penalty interest rates that were being charged. We started that back in the 80s. It took Congress 20 years to come along and get some regulations in there, but we were very much opposed to that, and we pleaded that case directly to the issuers that these over-limit fees, in fact, if you read in the blog and also on the pod, you'll understand, because I go into some specific situations and cases where we were actively involved in helping to, in fact, in some cases, it was just a matter of sitting right next to somebody who was in charge of the business and explaining, hey, you're doing a lot of wonderful things, but this is one thing here that doesn't make a lot of sense. So advocating for consumers, but also advocating for banks. We testified in antitrust litigation. There were a lot of battles between what they call the networks, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover. And there was major litigation. I testified as a star witness in a $2 billion case, and then ended up being heavily deposed in a $10 billion antitrust case. So, and that hinged on all this credibility that we had built up over the years, understanding the market and the dynamics of the market and the competition. At the same time, one of the biggest barriers to the card business was state regulations. And so we worked with Congress. There was a lot of ways we were able to get those barriers broken down. I mean, I didn't do it on my own. Obviously, it's the legislators, but we did help them to the extent we could. And slowly it did work out to the banks didn't have the barriers. There were some banks that wouldn't issue to certain states because their regulations were too tight. They just couldn't, it wasn't profitable to be in those states. So working with Congress, we were able to get that together. So that's kind of the early history of Professor CardWorthy and the background. In 1995, that was the year, you can't really see, there's not much to see below this, just the fact that 1995, of course, was the year of the internet. And that was explosive, of course. It was at that time we launched a website, which was very unusual. I mean, I remember being in a bank conference where we announced our website. There was probably 600-700 attendees, and when you ask, well, how many people had any familiarity with the web, and these bankers, it was just a handful of hands. So it was very new at that time. So we ended up launching a website and a daily news service that we were able to distribute over the internet. And the cool thing about the internet was now we could go, like any business, global instead of just staying in the United States. And so it allowed us to, it actually enabled us to be able to help other banks. We worked with a number of top banks in getting their internet systems set up back in 1995 and 1996. And then, of course, the business just expanded. We were involved in it expanded. We had more offices in the United States, and then we went to offices in London and Sydney as well. So we had a global presence. We started working with some international issuers. There were a lot of interesting markets to deal with, but some of the international banks were actually interested in coming in to the United States through their U.S. subsidiaries. They needed to understand the market, and so we were able to provide them with the necessary consulting services. Well, anyway, fast forward up here to 2007. That's actually when Professor CardWorthy was born, the character. We did a series of shows. There are about 50 of them. They're on YouTube. It's under CardWorthy, and you can go there and watch them. There are about just 50 different areas of just credit cards. I mean, you want to know anything about late fees, business cards, credit repair, it's all there. And even though it's 12 years old, a lot of that information is still very relevant. In fact, I would say probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 70, maybe 80% of it is still relevant. So you can go there and look at that. We'll be sort of updating all of that as we go along. But the new Professor CardWorthy, the Professor CardWorthy YouTube channel, it's called CardWorthy online, of course, CardWorthy.com, and then Professor CardWorthy's Corner is our podcast. The YouTube here is under Professor CardWorthy. So those older videos are under CardWorthy. This is Professor CardWorthy. And what we're doing as far as the shows, we're talking about experiences, personal experiences, and blending that together with real money knowledge, and then hopefully add a little wisdom to it, and you know, or maybe a little bit of humor too. I think you'll get a kick out of some of the stories. Actually, if you go on the blog, you can read them now or listen to them, and then very shortly you'll be able to hear a little summary of them here on YouTube. But we're all about giving, you know, the solid advice, credible facts. Today, you know, it's become on the internet very muddled. You get a lot of really good, well-written articles to give you guidance on financial products, but they're intertwined. They have a lot of promotional interest, many of these publishers, where they embed links to where they earn commissions off some of the content if they refer someone. And that's one reason why you constantly hear about the largest banks in the country, and it's because they will pay generously to help, if they can find people, affiliate with other companies and to sign up. Whereas there's a lot of credit cards from credit unions and small banks that are just as good as what you can find on the national level, and in many cases much less expensive. Maybe not always with the huge credit lines, but at least they're good, solid products, and you should check that out. So our goal is to kind of clear the fog out. We come to you not just from the consumer angle, but from the business angle as well, so you understand everything. Well, anyway, to learn more, again, the website is CardWorthy.com. The blog is Professor CardWorthy's Corner. Also, of course, here on the YouTube under Professor CardWorthy. I want to remind you to become a friend of CardWorthy. We have the program. We need donations to keep going. We've made huge investments over the last 18 months in putting together some new websites, and also ultimately with CardWorthy. And that's all explained. If you go to the GoFundMe page on CardWorthy, just enter, when you go GoFundMe, hit the CardWorthy, and it'll pop right up. And it's called Help Professor CardWorthy Live. And we've resurrected him from 2007. We want to keep Professor CardWorthy alive. So we need some help in that area. And it's all explained, and it's explained why that's necessary. And you can use that to make small personal donations. Anything is appreciated. You'll get a copy of our newsletter on a monthly basis. All donors will. And if you're in the business, you want to make a business donation, you're going to get offers from other services that we are affiliated with that will more than justify the contributions that you make. And you can do it either way. You can go online. There's a way to donate online, and there of course is the GoFundMe account. And again, one of the reasons in raising the money is, if you look at the older versions, they're a little more polished. This is a straight one-cut thing, unedited. You're not seeing any fancy dancy stuff here. But if we can get the funds that we need, which is not a huge amount, then we can go forward, get stabilized, and then start expanding so we can make this even a more interesting production for you to enjoy. So, are you CardWorthy? Well, if you are, great. But if you're not, if you stay with CardWorthy and keep coming back and listening to us, we're going to get you there. All my students will eventually become CardWorthy. So it's been great to be here, talk to you today, and to come back. I want you to be a student. And our goal, this show actually is running a little longer than our normal ones, but come back. They'll probably be like 5 to 7 minutes, so it won't take up a lot of time. But we wanted to really get acquainted, and I'm happy that you took the time out to watch here today. And I hope you learned something about us, but most importantly, maybe even put a smile on your face. So I'm Professor CardWorthy, and you have yourself a good day. And I forgot oh, here it is. Okay, we'll close the show out. That's it. Goodbye, and thanks a lot.